Godzilla, a cultural icon that people around the world recognize. So popular that the suffix "zilla" is used to describe someone or something that is an uncontrollable monster that destroys every obstacle in their path. There have been countless parodies and references across multiple different forms of media. It is safe to say that Godzilla is one of the most popular and well-known characters in the history of fiction. So why haven't I seen a Godzilla movie until 2023? Godzilla was always this odd outlier to me. It never seemed like my cup of tea. I mean, sure, I was a dinosaur kid just like most boys, but Godzilla never really piqued my interest. But now in 2023, the year of our Lord and Savior, I decided to dip my toe into the franchise when I heard that Godzilla -1 was coming to theaters in the States. That was something I had to wrap my head around, by the way. For those unaware, in Japan, the country where Godzilla was created, the rights belong to the Toho Company. They created the first Godzilla all the way back in 1954, merely 9 years after the atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki and the fire bombings of Tokyo. This will be oh so relevant soon. In America, Legendary Pictures and Warner Brothers Studios were granted permission by Toho to develop their own take on the character and universe, starting with Godzilla 2014. I will be referring to this film simply as 2014 from here on out. This film was then followed by a direct sequel in 2019. There is a King Kong movie that ties into these films and a crossover movie that follows, but I will be strictly focusing on Godzilla in this video. Now, what did I think about Godzilla -1?
Fucking awesome.
This film was phenomenal. Don't worry, I will warn you when I start spoiling things. But without spoilers, I have to say that this film is easily the best film of 2023. Unlike films like Transformers, Sonic the Hedgehog, and other monster movies, hint hint, I didn't find myself hating the human characters and wanting them to die or go away so we could see the CGI ticket sellers in action. I cared about the humans and their struggles. I wanted to see them survive. I didn't want Godzilla to destroy everything in sight. Barring a few small things, I can't recommend this film enough. So from here on out, after seeing -1, I did a lot of research. I was introduced to obscure characters like Jet Jaguar, I learned about the philosophy behind Godzilla's creation, and I learned about the complicated history of the clashing portrayals of American Godzilla and Japanese Gojira. Initially, I was going to jump right into making a bog standard review of -1, but I wanted a better understanding of the character and franchise, and it all starts with that 1954 film. In the original film, Godzilla was designed to be an allegory for the destruction that nuclear weapons and war cause, especially in civilian areas. Godzilla's wrath is indiscriminate and merciless. In our eyes, he's considered a villain, but he does not operate by humanity's standards of good and evil. And in -1, I can see all of those themes on display in full force. But before diving deeper into -1, let's compare this to how the American films handle Godzilla. This is when the cursing starts. You have been warned. 2014 is one of the most blue-balling, cock-teasing films I have ever seen. Godzilla doesn't make his first appearance until halfway into the movie. This is the film's namesake, for crying out loud. And then when he finally shows up and fights one of the Mutos, the film literally cuts away to the kid watching it on TV, and then the following morning. What the fuck? Look at this! I did not edit this.
Come on, Sammy, let's go. Let's go, it's bedtime. Sammy.
Mommy, look. Dinosaurs.
Some paint-sniffing film snob probably thinks this was genius because it builds up excitement for the final battle. Ah, you see, this is exquisite. By withholding what the audience desires, we can feast upon the delightful battle at the end of the film, and it will be marvelous. Well, guess the fuck what? You can't see shit in the final battle. For nearly half of the film, I was groaning about how I couldn't see anything. When the male Muto died, I didn't even know what happened. I had to watch it again on a different screen with the brightness turned up to finally see what happened. And the cope for this is that, apparently, Warner Brothers screwed up the home video release of the film.
Fuck you, folks.
But even then, look at this shot when the soldiers are about to close in on the nuke that's been taken by the female Muto. This is how a nighttime shot is supposed to look. Yes, real-life darkness is basically pitch black, but in a film, you need to make concessions so the audience can make out what the fuck is happening. Distant moonlight, dim streetlights, fires, something. Look at how the surrounding fires create ambient light that helps the audience determine what's on screen. It also helps to see when the female Muto approaches because we can then see the silhouette of her leg when it steps into the area. Do you know which movie didn't have opaque as fuck nighttime scenes? Guess. It's less about the production company fucking up and it's more about the director, set decorator, VFX coordinators, and cinematographer fucking up. Moving on, the human cast is bloated. There are simply too many characters and none of them are developed enough for me to care. This is common in many disaster films, including the first Transformers, which was designed as a disaster film. Honestly, some of the cast could have been condensed so we had a more focused vision. Joe and Ford Brody should have been combined into one character. The same goes for Dr. Ishiro and Dr. Vivian. I had to Google their names, by the way. The military guys too. Admiral Stenz and Captain Hampton could have just been a single character. The single good character was utterly wasted and everyone else is just bland. Joe Brody was the only character who had the potential for me to care about. Here's what they should have done instead of killing off his character at the 40-minute mark and wasting Bryan Cranston's time. Erase Ford entirely. Keep the intro where Joe loses his wife to the Muto egg. Jump 15 years into the future and Joe has found a new wife and has helped birth a son. Monarch has contacted him in regards to his experience with the facility 15 years ago. Joe is reluctant, but he goes with Monarch to ensure his wife and son are safe. With Godzilla and the Mutos wreaking havoc on the world, Joe is determined to find a way to keep his new family safe so he doesn't have a repeat of what happened in the nuclear facility in 1999. We saw why Joe is concerned. We feel for him after he lost his first wife, so now we're rooting for him to succeed. -1 did this expertly with Koichi. I'll go into more detail about Koichi later. The next character I want to talk about from 2014 is Dr. Ishiro. He's kind of just here being a moron. He's supposed to be the naturist guy that says that Godzilla is here to restore balance, but when you look at the amount of damage a fight Godzilla partakes in creates, why would anyone in their right fucking mind want Godzilla or any of these titans alive? He doesn't even provide any real alternatives to nuking the shit out of all of them. He doesn't say, it won't work, or you'll only make them stronger. He just says, no, please don't do it. This wouldn't be too bad of an issue if he had stronger reasons for sparing Godzilla. It's like he only wants Godzilla to live because he knows the franchise is named after him. He's the exact same person in the sequel, by the way. Admiral Stenz is the most well-reasoned person in the film. He is looking at the situation realistically and concludes that these titans cannot be allowed to run amok at the cost of humanity. But for some reason, the movie portrays his actions as immoral, unfair, and barbaric. Oh right, it's because the movie is named Godzilla. Ford, Elle, and Sam Brody are paper-thin characters. The best compliment I give them is that I didn't want anything bad to happen to them. I best describe my feelings towards the Brody family as the similar feeling you get when meeting the friend of your friend who is not a mutual friend and basically coming away from the interaction thinking, I do not care about this person, but I hope they do well in whatever they are doing. Elizabeth Olsen does give a great performance with what little she's given in this film though. I do want to point out this one scene that has a lot of lost potential in terms of character writing. At the beginning of the film, Sam asks his dad Ford if he's going to still be home in the morning. Ford is taken aback for a moment and says that he will. In the next scene, Elle gets a call for Ford stating that his father Joe has been arrested in Japan, and Ford prepares to leave to bail him out. We never get to see Sam's reaction to his dad breaking his promise to be there when he said he would. He's just this emotionless kid for the rest of the movie. I have to point out how shockingly bad the child actor for Sam is. Pretty sure the kid was either really shy or a pain in the ass to work with, because the most you get out of him is at the beginning of the film. After his introductory scene, Sam is this flat, non-reactive child that has most of his lines delivered when he's not in the frame.
Bedtime. Sammy.
Mommy, look. Dinosaurs.
Al, I'm gonna take care of him, okay? Say bye-bye, Mommy.
Bye, Mommy.
There's a lot of shots of Sam behaving inconsistently internally and externally. One shot of Sam on the bus has him playing with somebody when he was mute and non-reactive just a few seconds earlier. I genuinely think they just ran the camera and let these kids play as B footage, and Sam's actor was just being himself in this shot. Then when Godzilla appears, there's a shot of the kids looking on in awe, but Sam looks like he's ecstatic to see Godzilla. It's like Sam is in a completely different movie. I'm surprised there isn't a shot of Sam looking directly at the camera that accidentally got into the film. There's a Godzilla film with a good child actress in it. It's called -1. Nobody else is really worth mentioning, but I didn't notice this until looking at the Wikipedia page for this movie. Gary Chalk, the original voice of Optimus Primal, is in this movie. He played this guy at the beginning of the movie.
Wait, hold on. Seismic activity? Seismic like an earthquake? You talking about earthquakes?
Well, that's just prime. Well, that's just prime!
You can kind of hear Optimus Primal when he starts talking, too. Well, at least the characters in this film are at best underutilized and at worst paper thin and bland. The same can't be said for the other film. I'm going to save Godzilla himself for last because he is consistently stupid and the concept behind him is also stupid in both American films. The main bad guys of this film are the massive unidentified terrestrial organisms, or MUTOs for short. One male and one female. Basically, the plot is to stop the male Muto from mating with the big Dommy Mommy Muto and hatching a whole swarm of Mutos. Wait, this is the plot of the 1998 movie, isn't it? The goal in that movie was to stop Godzilla from having a bunch of baby monsters, right? Anyways, let's talk about the more offensive movie, King of the Monsters, because I have a lot to say about this movie. Before working on this project, I told my friend who is a Godzilla fan that I was watching the American films so I could see the difference between the portrayal and writing style. He loves the MonsterVerse version of Godzilla. As soon as I finished watching King of the Monsters, I simply texted him, "I'm so sorry. This movie is a disgrace. To give you an idea of how bad the damage is, the only thing I liked about this movie was King Ghidorah's roar in this one scene." That should tell you how unsalvageable this film is. Ford Brody has been dropped as the protagonist, which isn't a big deal because he wasn't really a character to begin with. In his place, we get Mark Russell. Now take a listen to this premise. A family loses a member due to the destruction of one of the Titans. One member becomes obsessive over these events and the other goes their separate way. When the obsessive family member is in trouble, the distant family member is called in to help them out. Now riddle me this. Was I talking about 2014 or King of the Monsters? Unfortunately, the similarities stopped there. The sign that things were going to get rocky was in the first scene, where they retconned how dark it was and how many emergency services were available during Godzilla's San Francisco fight in 2014. While yes, the film is better lit than 2014, what you do end up seeing is sheer, unadulterated fuck shit. The full premise is that Emma Russell and her daughter Madison are kidnapped by an eco-terrorist named Alan Jonah. Monarch, the private organization that corrals and looks over the Titans, call for Mark Russell to return so they can assist in finding Emma before the terrorists release all of the Titans. The characters are all bland as shit. There is no Bryan Cranston level acting or characterization here. Mark is a jaded man who lost his son in the Godzilla fight of 2014. He proceeded to search for the cure to his pain at the bottom of a bottle of booze. He hates the Titans but is called back to Monarch due to his expertise with them. He stays the same character throughout the entire movie. He has no, Godzilla ain't all that bad moment like a character such as this would typically have. Emma is Mark's ex-wife. We'll come back to Emma. She's a special case. Madison is their daughter who ended up in Emma's custody after the divorce. She's apparently a 12-year-old who works with her mother at a Monarch facility in the Yunnan rainforest in China! You aren't fooling me. This girl isn't 12 and no science facility in their right mind or with the right management would let this child be anywhere near anything in this facility. Have you spoken to an actual 12-year-old? They are not this articulate. In any case, she's a decent character barring the stupid shit she does at the end of the movie. Why did she unplug the orca? Why didn't she just turn it off after it was unplugged? It allows Ghidorah to find her almost instantly. Alan Jonah is the leader of the eco-terrorist group. He has no other traits about his character besides the fact that he wants to release the Titans because he hates humanity. He also fails to be a good villain based on the 8 pillars from my Kang the Clown video. There's nothing particularly unique about this guy, and he doesn't really carry himself in a respectable way. This dude gets into a debate with a 12-year-old and slams his fist on the table when he's given too much pushback. What a joke of a villain. Dude didn't even name his terrorist group. They're just called the Eco-Terrorist. What, the writers couldn't be asked to name them something like Titanus Libertas or the Heralds or I don't know, the Bloodhounds? Not giving the terrorist group a proper name makes their presence muted and referencing them in any context becomes clunky. Sam Coleman is this random soy latte drinking motherfucker who adds nothing to the movie other than awkward comedy. I'm gonna pass talking about this guy. Another character who adds nothing to the movie. Dr. Ishiro is back. Dr. Graham is also back. They're the same characters as the last movie and they both fucking die. We also now have 2 new science characters, Dickhead Scientist and Asian Scientist. The only distinguishing factors about them is that one is a dickhead and the other is Asian. That's about it. Well, let me be a little bit more charitable. At least the Asian Scientist explained what the fuck was going on with Ghidorah and has something of a backstory. Should have just combined the two and made a dickhead Asian Scientist. Would have been more interesting. Holy fuck, they modeled Dickhead Scientist after Rick Sanchez. That is absolute cringe. Monarch security people, Hispanic guy, racially ambiguous guy, and black independent woman leader. The racially ambiguous guy is played by Ice Cube's son and delivers the movie's one usage of the F word.
You gotta be fucking kidding.
Nothing characters. Probably should have been condensed into one character. Moving on. Admiral Stenz is back and he's still one of the most reasonable characters in the film. Fuck them monsters, kill them all. Alright, so we're finally going to do it. I've stalled long enough. Let's talk about Emma. Strap in because this is a doozy. See, Emma was kidnapped because she has this device called the Orca, which allows her to control the Titans through audio frequencies. The film starts with everyone under the assumption that Emma and Madison were kidnapped. But oh my god, is it so much worse than that. Later in the film, Alan plants bombs in a Monarch facility in Antarctica to release Ghidorah, the supposed Monster Zero. When the terrorists are confronted by Mark at gunpoint, Emma takes the detonator herself and blows up the bombs, freeing Ghidorah. At this point, I was a bit intrigued. I thought we were going to get something interesting and cool. Instead, we got one of the worst characters ever in any film I have ever seen. Emma later contacts Mark and the rest of Monarch to explain herself. She states that they must release the Titans because the Earth is overpopulated and humanity is killing the planet. So the Titans are Earth's quote-unquote fever. They are meant to cull the planet of humanity so that Earth may survive. Emma willingly worked with the eco-terrorist organization to expedite the process. I have never heard of a dumber motive for a character who is supposed to be a well-intentioned extremist. She decided the fate of the rest of mankind without so much as even thinking about the possible ramifications of these actions. Do you know who makes up the majority of the US military? Men at 80.8%. Do you know who makes up the majority of infrastructure-related jobs such as electricity, construction, plumbing, and emergency services? Men at 82%. Do you know who is going to get drafted into the military when the reserves deplete? Men at fucking 100%. If she were to succeed, the Titans would raise the Earth, destroying the infrastructure, killing the majority of the military when they are forced to respond, and sucking all of the men out of the US infrastructure to fight in a hopeless war against these nigh invincible monstrosities. And when the men are plucked out of their jobs working on the electrical grid and water facilities, women would not be able to replace them fast enough because they simply do not have the training and would not be able to learn fast enough when you factor in how quickly these titans can level a city. The electrical grid would fail and millions would die. Hospital patients on respirators and life support, diabetics whose insulin needs to be refrigerated, and people in extremely cold or hot climates would be killed due to lack of electricity. This would be a mass casualty event on the scale of several holocausts, and that is a conservative estimate and only takes into account the US. This would likely be even worse on a global scale. Did I mention she brought her 12-year-old daughter along for all of this? She introduces her to dangerous, murderous terrorists and hauls her around through bomb-infested facilities and monster attacks. There's no explanation for why Madison has to be at the Monster Zero facility. This cunt is the foulest creature ever put to film. And the movie expects you to feel bad for her. They have her daughter Madison disown her after she finds out that obviously millions of people are going to die. When Madison hatches her own plan to save humanity by stealing the Orca, we get this shot of Emma crying in the terrorist company break room or something after Madison calls her a monster and asks the armor-piercing question,
"You said we were doing this for Andrew. Do you really think you would have wanted this?"
It's shot as if we're supposed to feel sorry and sympathetic for her. If anything, I feel insulted that the film thought it could get away with this. Even the terrorist leader calls Emma out for roping Madison into this operation and sugarcoating the nature of their operation to her. Just listen to this.
Did you really think this was going to be easy, painless? Is that what you told her?
Leave her out of this.
Why? You're the one who pulled her into it. Madison, tell me, what exactly did Mummy sell you on? Some grand utopia? Man and monster living together in blissful harmony? This
guy is a misanthrope, by the way. You're making me agree with the misanthrope and I don't like it, movie. And then, after surprise, the eco-terrorist reveals to Emma that he's just a mustache-twirling villain who hates humanity himself. Emma is now treated as a good guy. She goes to try and save her daughter, meets up with her ex-husband Mark, and aside from Mark making a passing comment about Emma's fucked up, irredeemable actions, everyone works together to save Madison. Madison and Mark are even sad when Emma stays back to distract Ghidorah with the Orca in what is supposed to be a heroic sacrifice of some kind. Bitch, you deserve a fate worse than death. You deserve to be put on trial, and your crimes against humanity should be broadcast across the world so that everyone will know the truth. You sold out your entire species for the sake of giant monsters and climate activism. You should rot in prison and subsequently rot in hell. Now, I didn't mention the plot of 2014 much because it's at best inoffensive and at worst, tismy. But the plot of King of the Monsters is fucking disdainful. Emma made this box called the Orca, which can control the Titans using audio frequencies. In the scene it's introduced in, she has to calibrate it to tame Mothra. but she waits until Mothra hatches and threatens to level the entire facility to do so. Did you have to wait until Mothra hatched and endangered everyone in order to calibrate it? Did you need to go out directly in front of her in order to calibrate it? Is there no way to connect the Orca to a database in order to directly download the frequencies needed? Well, I have news for you. Later on, the film confirms that the answer to all of those questions is no. When setting up the plan to free Ghidorah, Emma plugs the Orca into a computer and calibrates the bioacoustic frequency needed to control Ghidorah before he's thawed out. So the first scene with Mothra was just done to establish a fake sense of tension and danger. Nice. There's also this dumb recurring gimmick where the writers will write the characters into a corner with no way out, and when it seems like their goose is well and truly cooked, Godzilla shows up and saves them just in the nick of time. It got so predictable that I called when it would happen and got it right every single time. Bullshit fucking garbage writing. They wanted to have their big damn heroes moment, but it comes across as overindulgent, lazy, and cheap. You know what counts as a good big damn heroes moment? Also, there's this moment where the main bad guy... Wait, no, not her. The terrorist bad guy, Alan Jonah. Yeah, he gets informed that Madison stole the Orca and is trying to foil their plans. And he just says, we're good. We have what we need. Let's go get pizza. Like, what the hell is this? He's not being responsive to the situation at hand. The post-credits scene shows us that the thing that he was after was one of Ghidorah's severed heads. None of this matters because Alan sells the head to some corporation in between movies and doesn't make an appearance in Godzilla vs. Kong. Not much of a cinematic universe if you can't even fully commit to your post-credit scene teasers. Also, Monarch and Dr. Ishiro are still trying to live in harmony with these monstrosities. Emma explains how the monsters heal the Earth wherever they go, and Dr. Ishiro states that the nuclear testing of Bikini Atoll awoke the Titans, implying that humanity's poor treatment of the Earth is what triggered them. But the problem here is that the Titans need to destroy everything in order to heal the Earth. The repair that the Titans passively enact is at the cost of humanity's efforts and human lives. There is no way humanity could coexist with these giant beasts because the human species faces the threat of extinction every time one of these things so much as farts. I'm going to tell you what this really is. A thinly veiled climate change message. This film attempts to have an ideological message and does it atrociously. Why would you make the bad guys the people who care about the environment? Why does humanity need to be destroyed to save the planet? What are you implying here, film? This message gets dropped by the time the film ends. There is no final scene explaining how humanity needs to be better stewards of the planet. No villain has a point moment. It's just over. Sloppy, hollow, self-righteous preaching is one of my most hated pet peeves. The film's message is basically, humans dumb and no take good care of Earth. Monsters kill humans because humans bad. Do better. In comparison, I actually won't reference -1 for this. I will be talking about Shin Godzilla as I watched it during the production of this video. I'm so glad I did because it delivers its ideological message way better than King of the Monsters did. Shin Godzilla is less of a movie and more of a commentary on government incompetence. When Shin Godzilla appears, it bursts a hole in one of Japan's underwater tunnels and threatens the lives of everyone in it. It swims up a canal, destroying everything in the water. After debating on how to respond for an absurd amount of time, the government inadequately informs the public of the threat, telling them that the monster is not likely to come ashore. Literally, as the Prime Minister is telling the public Godzilla cannot come ashore, Godzilla becomes bipedal and crawls through the city, destroying everything in its path as it struggles to exist in its second form. It's kind of unintentionally funny how the PM is briefed on this, but it perfectly encapsulates how slowly the government is to respond to emergencies due to bureaucracy and legal red tape. By the time Godzilla transforms into its third form, the government has finally responded by dispatching a squadron of attack helicopters. But because the government inadequately evacuated the city, the helicopter pilots hold their fire at the sight of innocent civilians in the target area. There is an entire sequence where requests and commands get bounced up and down the chain of command while this volatile monster is standing there. Godzilla flees with the Special Defense Force never even firing a single shot at it. The main protagonist, Yaguchi, later states that Godzilla wasn't even on land for more than 2 hours, meaning that the Japanese government was probably faffing about, arguing about solutions for about an hour and a half. Shin Godzilla's commentary is about the slow process of government action and reaction. As human lives are in danger and lost, the government is behind its own ass trying to keep up with a rapidly evolving situation. And by the time it has anything to say on the matter to help ease concern or save lives, the information is either outdated or obvious common knowledge. Alright, before I get any more political, I want to cut the discussion off there. Long story short, if you're going to have a political or ideological message, please have more tact and thought put into it than whatever King of the Monsters did. I know this isn't related to the writing, but I have no other chance to talk about it. The music in the American movies is painfully boring and uninspired. Of course, I can't play any of it, but the Godzilla suite from the Japanese films is iconic and really embodies the large, oppressive, and destructive nature of Godzilla. In 2014, they gave Godzilla this generic off-brand superhero theme that I can't even remember 5 seconds after hearing it. It's almost as if Godzilla's theme is too dark and villainous, so they had to come up with some generic as fuck superhero theme to replace it because this new Godzilla is supposed to be a good guy or something. They play his actual theme randomly throughout King of the Monsters, but it's not really in connection to anything of substance. They just play it whenever Godzilla makes his appearance. The -1 soundtrack is incredible and isn't just generic music with sprinklings of Godzilla's theme. Yes, the original Godzilla theme is used when Godzilla appears, but it fits the mood of the scene better and injects the appropriate emotions into the moment. Let's finally talk about the monster of the hour, Godzilla. I don't like this version of Godzilla. What they decided to do in this universe is basically make Godzilla a Doomslayer-esque anti-hero who is here to restore balance in the world. Instead of Godzilla just being the de facto bad guy in 2014 and his relationship with the humans getting more complicated as time goes on, they just decided to jump to the easiest and laziest solution available. Make him fight 2 other monsters in this film, the male and female Mutos. We could have gotten a movie where humanity must prove to Godzilla that they can coexist while Godzilla can find compassion for a single human who could represent the best of our species. But nah, big monster fight other big monster. King of the Monsters doubles down on this premise. These movies also muddy the water of this already frail interpretation of this character by pretending he's some great savior when he makes no attempt to mitigate the death and destruction his fights indirectly cause. When he kills the male Muto, Godzilla slams it into a building, causing it to collapse and killing any possible survivors inside and around the building. These films treat the destruction that Godzilla causes as an exclamation point to what I'm supposed to believe is an exciting story, while the Japanese treat Godzilla's destruction as a tragedy that you don't really want to watch but need to see how it ends. The American films know this interpretation is flaky because they did their best to address this criticism in King of the Monsters. Godzilla only appears in that film in desolate and unpopulated areas such as the Arctic, the ocean, and in a fully evacuated Boston, Massachusetts. Not to be confused with Boston, Kentucky. That way, Godzilla doesn't indirectly kill a bunch of people like he did in 2014. Even Japanese critics agreed that 2014 wasn't in line with the spirit of Godzilla's anti-war, anti-nuclear arms message. In my opinion, America glorifies the destruction as a spectacle, while Japan depicts it as earnestly as possible. People are killed by these monsters in the American films, and it's shot in a way that says, "Whoa, look at how powerful and destructive these things are. Rodan's flight causes people to get swept up in a vortex and fall to their deaths. The Muto is so big. Godzilla's so big he can grab the Golden Gate Bridge like a handrail. Ghidorah zaps people and specifically targets innocent people to eat. Godzilla slammed that Muto into the building and the building came down. Wow, it's so amazing. I don't care if he's actively fucking up the good guys in this scene. It makes me so happy I'm going to fucking cum all over the fucking floor. Look at it. Look at it. Look at it." Moving on, Godzilla's combat prowess can best be summed up in this sentiment. Godzilla is a punk bitch in these American movies. He's nowhere near as formidable as his Japanese counterpart. In 2014, the male Muto was approximately 90 meters tall, and MonsterVerse Godzilla is about 119 meters tall, over double the size of -1 Godzilla. Yet for some reason, he can't just put the male Muto down like a sick dog. When he finally does, a building collapses on him and he ends up being winded. Winded! You smash buildings on the regular, but the one time the building smashes back, you're ready to tap out?
What a pathetic bitch.
There are also several times in the final battle of 2014 where Godzilla turns his back on the male Muto to fight the female one, only for the male to strike him from behind. Like, dude, just kill the male Muto and be done with it. Stop letting this thing fucking live when you could easily kill it. This presumably happens in the Hawaii fight because Godzilla and the male Muto are just gone the following morning. Nice. Thanks, Discord. Godzilla's atomic breath in these movies is piss poor too. It's just blue fire that's useless unless he uses it Kiss of Death style, like he did in 2014. He uses it in King of the Monsters and it seems to be upgraded, but the first time he uses it, he misses. Center mass, you fucking amateur. At the end of the movie, he uses it as a fatality once he's already defeated Ghidorah, but that's about it. In King of the Monsters, it's like watching a kaiju porn movie. Godzilla is constantly getting fucked by Ghidorah on screen. Even when Godzilla brings Ghidorah underwater, his own goddamn turf, he is still not able to do any significant damage to Ghidorah before the Oxygen Destroyer hits them both. And even then, the Oxygen Destroyer knocked Godzilla unconscious, but Ghidorah is basically unscathed. Ghidorah lost a head to Godzilla, but almost instantly grows it back. This Pyrrhic victory is not even worth celebrating. Side note, they just introduced the Oxygen Destroyer like it's a weapon that's always existed, when in reality, it's a reference to the original 1954 film. And you guessed it, none of the commentary from the 1954 film is present in King of the Monsters. In the final battle, after Godzilla's been supercharged with a fucking nuke, he still can't beat Ghidorah. Ghidorah chokes out Godzilla like the little pillow princess bitch he is in these movies, and takes him into orbit and drops him like a rock. It takes his baby mama Mothra sacrificing herself to power up Godzilla even more to finally finish off Ghidorah. This Godzilla is a fucking chump. Shin Godzilla was way more terrifying than MonsterVerse Godzilla. His atomic beam splits buildings and helicopters like a hot knife through butter. His appearance is ghastly. His fourth form looks like a giant dinosaur covered in scabs and burns with eyes that have no eyelids. His fucking jaw splits in half when he uses his atomic beam. Look at this haunting shot of him at night. I got chills when I saw this on my TV screen. The last shot of the film implies that Shin Godzilla was on the verge of evolving into its next form, and it involved releasing these disturbing as shit humanoid demon things from its tail. Hideaki Anno, what is wrong with you? However, now we can finally start moving the conversation towards -1. Godzilla in -1 is not some slow, lumbering beast that walks away from threats to focus his attention on something else. He has one thing on his mind: the destruction of those invading what he believes is his territory. If they want to fight back, Godzilla deems them as necessary to put down. His atomic breath is essentially an atom bomb that destroys everything within a 2-mile radius of whatever it hits. He's also rather reactive to a situation. When he realizes that there are balloons attached to him that are rapidly resurfacing him, he chews through them to stop himself from rapidly decompressing. It'll make sense in a second, I promise. And sure, he's smaller than his MonsterVerse and Shin counterparts, but this point on the fridge logic page of TV tropes perfectly explains why this makes Godzilla even more terrifying in -1.
At only 50 meters tall, -1 Godzilla is far shorter than the 118-meter MonsterVerse and Shin Godzillas. However, this works well given his portrayal. Unlike previous versions where he passively wreaks havoc on humans, seeing them little more than insects, a relatively smaller Godzilla puts him more at par with humans, meaning he is aware of humans, and seeks to destroy them on purpose. This contributes to Godzilla being more willful in his destructive actions. To a 50-meter tall monster, humans are small enough to be ants or rodents under his feet. Doubling the height paradoxically halves the terror of the monster crushing people underfoot because it becomes dubious if that's what he wants to do. By making -1's Godzilla 50 meters tall, his intentions with, and his actions upon, the humans become clearer.
One of the most frightening details in -1 is whenever Godzilla steps, the pavement folds and humans caught in the chaos get flung into the air and come crashing down, more than likely breaking all their limbs and dying in the process. This imagery stuck with me well after I walked out of the theater. That's something the MonsterVerse never really showed us. How the mere existence of these monsters does horrible things to tiny humans nearby. Well, the one shot of Rodan flying in the air and everybody getting swept up, that's like the one time, but that's the exception, not the rule. I am now going to gush about -1. It is sublime, my friends. Let's run through the plot as we talk about the main character, Koichi Shikishima. Koichi is a kamikaze pilot who turned tail and fled his duty. He landed on Odo Island where he lies to the technicians and says his plane malfunctioned. What's also a great character establishing moment is that we see the poor condition of the runway and how Koichi masterfully lands the plane despite this, establishing how talented he is as a pilot. Later that night, Godzilla attacks the outpost. Tachibana, the lead technician, tells Koichi to run to his plane and shoot Godzilla with a 20mm gun. I'm going to come back to this. When Koichi gets in the cockpit of his plane, he freezes and is unable to shoot Godzilla. The mechanics, armed with rifles, panic and shoot at Godzilla. The monster decimates the entire outpost and Koichi passes out. In the morning, Tachibana pins the deaths of everyone on Koichi. Later, he forces Koichi to take a packet containing the photos of all the dead mechanics with their respective families. Upon returning home, Koichi finds out that he lost everything in World War II. His parents, his home, and the respect of his country, which is personified by his neighbor, a woman named Sumiko. She berates Koichi by telling him that Japan lost the war because of cowards like him. But after she leaves, Koichi reads a letter that his parents wrote to him, telling him to come home alive. This makes the audience ask, is Koichi really a coward, or did he just want to fulfill his promise to his parents? Also, I love that this film consolidates entire concepts into single characters so that there is a physical representation of an idea rather than a nebulous concept floating around the narrative. There's another character that does this and we'll talk about him later. Later, a woman with a baby girl is accused of thievery and is chased through the village. When accidentally body blocked by Koichi, she shoves the baby in his arms and continues to flee. Koichi sits with the baby and waits for the woman's return. After realizing that the woman is probably not returning, Koichi prepares to leave the baby but can't bring himself to do it. He braces himself to take the child home with him. As he walks home, the woman who stuck him with the baby emerges from an alley and takes the baby back. When asked why he didn't just leave the baby, Koichi says that he couldn't just leave the child alone in a place like that. She finds this interesting and follows him home. After letting the woman cook some rice for the baby, she introduces herself as Noriko. I love this character. Noriko explains that the baby's name is Akiko and that the baby's parents were killed in the air raids. They asked her to take care of the child. Noriko also states that she's in the same boat as Koichi. Her parents were also killed in the bombings. Noriko makes herself at home and sleeps in Koichi's shed. Koichi initially protests, but doesn't have it in him to kick them out. With this section, we see that Koichi is a good-natured guy who will do the right thing if given the opportunity and willpower to do so, but he doesn't really have the zeal and drive to seek out these opportunities. The next morning, Sumiko taunts Koichi after she sees him let Noriko and Akiko sleep in his shed. She tells him it's too late to be a hero and that helping this woman does not absolve him of his cowardice. Koichi dismisses her, but before he can leave, Sumiko shows concern for the baby and provides the last of her high-quality white rice for the baby and the baby alone. Months pass and Koichi gets a government job minesweeping in the ocean. It has its risks, but it pays well. We see Koichi bond with his coworkers, his partner Noriko, and the baby girl Akiko. He can afford to build a nice home, and life seems to be going well for him. But one night while having his coworkers over for dinner, Koichi reveals that he and Noriko have been living and raising Akiko together for about a year, and Koichi has still not asked Noriko to be his wife despite how well this setup works. He even tells Akiko that he is not her father. While this seems mean and cold-spirited at the moment, Koichi has a reason for why he is so evasive about the situation, which will be explained later. Time passes and Noriko reveals that she got a job in Ginza, a district that is rebuilding rather quickly, creating job opportunities for many people. Koichi is taken aback when he realizes that Noriko is planning on moving out because Koichi has made it clear that he is not interested in marrying Noriko, so she is getting out of his way so he can find someone else to marry. Koichi is watching the life he had grown to love be taken away from him. But little did he know, it would be threatened in a completely different way very soon. Koichi has nightmares about the Godzilla attack on Odo Island. He suffers from survivor's guilt and he even wonders if he's still alive, if Noriko and Akiko are just figments of his imagination or ghosts that are visions of a dying or long dead man. He even pleads with Noriko to tell him he's still alive. The following day, Koichi and his co-workers are tasked with investigating a downed US Navy ship for signs of Godzilla, but in reality, they are tasked with stalling for time until the Japanese battleship why did I not verify how to pronounce this shit? Until the Japanese battleship Takao arrives. Godzilla shows up and is even bigger than it was on Odo Island due to being bathed in radioactive material from the Bikini Atoll nuclear tests. Koichi mans the ship's turret but nearly freezes again as his hand trembles in fear. But through clenched teeth, he pushes past his fear and shoots at Godzilla. The team tries to drop mines, but the first one does nothing and the second one gets damaged. Koichi fires on the mine as it's lodged in Godzilla's mouth. He actually manages to damage Godzilla significantly, but the monster regenerates. A neat detail is that the spot that Koichi damages on Godzilla is discolored for the rest of the film, a sign that not only is this thing capable of being harmed significantly, but that Koichi isn't useless like he or the rest of his country think he is. Just before Godzilla manages to kill Koichi and his team, the Takao arrives and distracts the Titan. Unlike the cheap moments in King of the Monsters, this big damn heroes moment works well because it was already established at the beginning of this sequence that the Takao was en route to this location, so it doesn't feel unnatural. But even the mighty power of the Takao is not enough, as Godzilla uses his atomic breath from below the ship to annihilate it. Koichi passes out as he watches the pride and joy of Japan's navy be destroyed like a child's toy by Godzilla. Koichi wakes up in the hospital to find that Japan's government is not going to tell the public what happened as it could incite panic. He returns home and Noriko asks him why he's so troubled. Koichi explains what happened on Odo Island. He specifically mentions the 20mm gun. It seems Koichi feels great shame because he might believe that he could have possibly killed Godzilla when it was smaller if he hadn't frozen in that moment. Whether or not this is true doesn't matter when it comes to the character's writing. It's more about the character's tragic realization that a flaw of theirs stopped them from preventing an even greater threat. He also explains that he failed again when faced against Godzilla in a rematch. This is interesting as it shows us how Koichi perceives himself. What he said was verifiably false. He did more damage to it than the Takao did with all of its cannons. Because of how much shame he feels for his cowardice when facing Godzilla and the tongue lashing he received as a reluctant kamikaze, Koichi can only see himself as a failure. Koichi wakes up the next day and looks at the shrine of his parents and the photos of the dead mechanics. He asks them if it's finally time to live again. When Noriko is off at work and Koichi is watching over Akiko, Godzilla attacks Ginza. With how magnificently this was all set up, Godzilla -1 managed to make me very, very sad when Godzilla attacked Ginza. The people of Japan had been through so much up until this point. A world war where their government viewed its own people as disposable, 2 atom bombs that incinerated innocent civilians, and a firebombing of Tokyo that killed more people than both atom bombs. The morale of the country could not get any lower. A few years later, Japan was finally rebuilding and things were returning to a sense of normalcy. People managed to pick up the pieces, rebuild their lives, move forward after losing many loved ones, and make a living for themselves, only for Godzilla to appear and tear it apart in mere minutes. This is why the title of the film is -1. The country was already at its lowest point, and Godzilla brings them even lower. This movie made me care about large crowds of people without knowing anyone's name. An impressive feat in and of itself. Koichi arrives in Ginza and helps Noriko. The military arrives and shoots Godzilla with several tank rounds. When the smoke clears, Godzilla remains. Godzilla's tail begins to glow blue as it charges up. The people look on in awe, standing still and dumbstruck. Godzilla releases a blinding ray that leaves a wake of devastation. When the beam connects with its target, it creates an explosion similar to that of an atomic bomb, the very iconography that Godzilla is meant to represent. One may find it to be kind of silly for everyone to just stand there and watch Godzilla charge up, but you would be applying an anachronism to the characters of the film. In 1947, there weren't decades worth of sci-fi or superhero media that depicted the trope of charging up an attack. These people likely had no idea what they were looking at or what was going to happen next. However, the next scene does contain something I have an issue with. As the blast from Godzilla's atomic breath creates a massive air burst, the wave of destruction careens towards Koichi and Noriko. Noriko makes a split-second decision to shove Koichi into a nearby alley, sacrificing herself in order for Koichi to live. I'm going to let Charlie explain why this is a problem.
That is my least favorite tropes in movies, because it's very clearly you wrote yourself into a corner, like you knew where you wanted to go but didn't know how to get there, so you fell onto this. Because the logical thing is, why wouldn't Noriko just grab Shikishima and both of them go into the alley? They are right next to it. It's not like she gave him like a giant fucking force push and sent them 50 yards back into this alley. They were less than a foot away from it. They were both right next to it. She could have just grabbed him and even fallen with him into the alley, or anything besides just a big push and standing there herself. This is something that I've seen used thousands of times in movies, and it just always makes me scratch my head and then puts a frown on my face for a brief moment, because I feel like in the real world, even during a very high intensity situation, even during a panic, the natural human instinct during something like that would be to tackle the person. Like when you see these clips of maybe someone doing a heroic act to stop someone or save someone in the real world, usually it's them tackling, jumping on the person and getting out of there. Thus, they both end up at the same place. So here, I feel like what would have happened is Noriko would have tackled Shikishima into the alley and they both would have been safe from the explosion, not just like shove him. You know, like it's a nitpick. It's not the biggest deal in the world. It's just a trope that I don't really like.
Continuing on, Koichi is distraught after his effort to save Noriko ends up being futile. A wake is held for Noriko at Koichi's home, and this scene is when Koichi's character begins to take a turn. One of his co-workers, nicknamed Doc, approaches him to inform him of an opportunity to take part in a private citizen-led effort to defeat Godzilla. The next day, Koichi attends a meeting to discuss a plan to defeat Godzilla. Koichi is initially unconvinced, but after Doc's explanations of Plan A and B, Koichi agrees to partake in this plan. Koichi has now been given the opportunity to be proactive and he accepts. Earlier in the movie, Koichi was a passive and reactive character who only accepted what he was thrust into. But now he's finally making conscious decisions to act from now through the rest of the film. Not only that, Koichi proposes a plan C, to fly a plane full of explosives into the mouth of Godzilla since it is vulnerable from the inside. Another one of Koichi's co-workers, Yoji, hisses at Koichi about wanting to throw his life away because he regrets not marrying Noriko. Yoji is a little drunk in this scene and directly confronts Koichi by grabbing his collar and hoisting him up out of his chair. Koichi retorts, saying that he knows he should have married Noriko, but his war is not over. He is not the man he needs to be in order to be the husband that Noriko wanted and the father Akiko needs. This line hit me like a train, because it's exactly how I feel about myself at this point in my life. Doc finds a prototype plane and informs Koichi that the plane is not ready to fly and needs a mechanic to fix it. Koichi has just the man in mind, Tachibana, the sole mechanic that survived the Odo Island attack. But Koichi runs into trouble when he can't find the address of Tachibana. He decides to mail out dozens of letters to every address associated with Tachibana in the past. Doc asks him why he's so persistent with Tachibana being the one to fix the fighter when time is running out and Godzilla could show up at any minute. The movie does not explain this, nor did I expect it to, but on my second viewing of this film, it clicked for me. From a writing perspective, Tachibana is the personification of Koichi's guilt. Tachibana was the one to force Koichi to take the photos of the dead mechanics. He was the one to blame Koichi for all their deaths due to his failure to act. And Koichi needed to make amends with the man that damned him to years of survivor's guilt. That night, Tachibana finds Koichi, knocks him out, drags him into an abandoned shed, and beats him for sending all of those letters blaming him for the deaths of the mechanics on Odo Island. Koichi explains that he only said that because he knew that it would bring Tachibana out of hiding and that he needed his help to fix a fighter to defeat Godzilla. Initially, Tachibana declines, but when he realizes that Koichi plans to kamikaze the plane into Godzilla, sacrificing himself in the process, Tachibana agrees to help. Why he agrees is not clear yet. Tachibana fixes the plane and gives Koichi the rundown for all of the controls of this fighter. Koichi is surprised that a part of him still wants to live. Tachibana says that the dead men of Odo Island did too. Koichi says that he is willing to die so that Akiko can have a bright future, and Tachibana tells him that Koichi finally understands and that he is ready. This is why Tachibana agreed to help. He saw a man finally ready to make the hard choice to save lives. Koichi starts the movie as a man who had no cause he was passionate enough to die for. He fled from combat, feigning mechanical issues with his plane. Even one of the mechanics on Odo Island tells him that he understands why he fled. Why sacrifice your life for a war that you've already lost and your government is too stubborn to see it? Throughout the film, he is pushed into situations, having no agency in his own condition. When faced with opposition, there was always either hesitation or complete catatonic shutdown. The men of Odo Island died because he froze and didn't shoot Godzilla with the plane's gun. Maybe it would have worked on a Godzilla that wasn't bathed in nuclear fire. We'll never know because Koichi was too afraid to act. Noriko sacrificed herself because Koichi froze and failed to act. Only at that moment did he realize that, as long as he remains a coward who is afraid to take action, everyone he cares about will die, and he refuses to let that fate fall upon Akiko. Akiko is his cause that he is finally willing to die for. Tachibana begins to speak about something else in the cockpit, but the movie fades his audio out so we can't hear him. What he tells Koichi will be discussed soon. Fast forward and the plan to destroy Godzilla is in full effect. Godzilla has approached land too soon and has essentially rendered the plan inoperable. Koichi flies his fighter towards Godzilla and lures it back to the ocean so the plan can commence proper. Koichi keeps Godzilla still in the ocean so the destroyer ships can lasso Godzilla with several Freon canisters that will sink it over 1,500 meters below sea level. After successfully sinking Godzilla, they deploy balloons to raise it back up, hoping the rapid crush depth and decompression will kill it. After realizing that it wasn't enough, Godzilla threatens to wipe them all out with its atomic breath. Koichi flies in and rams the plane in Godzilla's mouth, detonating the explosives and defeating the Titan seemingly once and for all. It is then revealed that Tachibana installed an ejector seat in the fighter and instructed Koichi on how to use it. Tachibana orders Koichi to live and be there for the little girl he adopted. Throughout the climax, it is uncertain whether or not Koichi would sacrifice himself or not, seemingly still undecided on whether or not he will fully commit to sacrificing himself. Initially, I thought Tachibana deceived Koichi by telling him that the lever for the bomb's safety was actually the ejector, but what we ended up with is so much better because Koichi made the conscious decision to live, keeping his agency. When they return to land, Koichi is met by his neighbor Sumiko, who he left Akiko to in case he did not survive. She hands him a telegram that she received while he was gone. After reading the telegram, Koichi rushes to the hospital with Akiko to find that Noriko has somehow survived. She asks him one question: "Is your war finally over?" Koichi breaks down and sobs in Noriko's arms. His bravery has been rewarded. Yes, the bits about Noriko's sacrifice and subsequent survival are not very well written, and there are some moments where you can tell that they were working with a limited budget. Like, there's this part where some Navy men are looking at Godzilla through some binoculars and they're just like, "Yes, I see it! It's crossing the buoy! It's definitely coming onto land! Yes, now! It's getting coffee! Oh my god! It's getting money out of the ATM! Jesus Christ!" But compared to the masterful work at play here, I can live with these issues. There's so much I didn't even mention, such as the masterful implementation of the commentary on the Japanese government's cheapening of lives during World War II. I feel like I was spoiled rotten by -1 being the very first Godzilla film I've ever seen. 2014 was a thin, hollow film that had nothing of substance to say or portray within its characters. King of the Monsters was an abomination with horrid character writing and dogshit plot writing. And while I did like Shin Godzilla, it is a very political and plot-driven film that cares less about character writing and storytelling and more about conveying a message about government response or lack thereof. -1 felt like a Japanese movie dressed up in a good Western movie's clothes. The production quality is out of this world. There are small details that I adore, such as the fact that Noriko and Koichi sleep with a curtain between each other because the two are not married. Sleeping with a person you are not married to was very, very taboo back then in Japan. It is a film that is unafraid of portraying Japan the way it truly was back in the aftermath of World War II, something most Western films would sugarcoat and rewrite in order to not offend modern sensibilities. I could see some moral busybodies getting offended because Noriko behaved like a housewife, but the film makes no apologies for depicting things the way they truly were back then. Come to think of it, why were Noriko and Hiromi two of my favorite characters in -1 and Shin Godzilla respectively? But in regard to the American movies, these things are dumb action movies about big monsters punching the fuck out of each other. Every time they try to have a commentary on anything of substance or build characters or a world that is supposed to be complex, the films at best fall on their faces and at worst create something morally fucked up when you start to think about it. Not to mention that it feels like the very heart and soul of what Godzilla is supposed to represent is purely absent from these movies. But just like Transformers, we will keep getting these dog shit movies because they sell an assload of toys. The pink-spined Godzilla from the new movie looks like it was made to sell toys. That's why these films can be financial black holes and still somehow get sequels. As I explained in my addendum to Star Wars Cannot Grow Up, this is slop. Unchallenging, mindless, formless, thoughtless, gussied up slop. And that's all it will ever be. They will never make a film on the level of -1 for one simple reason. While -1 got me to care about thousands of lives, the Monsterverse can't even get me to care about one. I want to thank you all for watching and for your continued support. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you'd like to support me and check out a novel from an indie author, hit the link in the description and take a look at my sci-fi military series Blur Havoc. Or if you'd like, check out my Patreon, Subscribestar, or affiliate links. If anything, a like and subscription is enough. It would be much appreciated. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you next time.